Gregor Mendel's Experiments, Thoughts, and Findings. Hi, my name is Gregor Mendel. I was born in Austria in 1822. When I was young, I became interested in plants, trees, and fruit. One day, I got very interested in pea plants, such that I studied them and distinguished the characteristics of them. I could create hybrids from the plants. My hybrid was of two pea plants. I could observe 7 traits from the plants, which were flower colors, flower position, stem length, seed shapes, seed color, pod shape, and pod color. I could cross-pollinate the different types of pea plants. I found heredity also, which was the transmission of traits from parents to their offspring. I chose to use peas for my experiments because of the distinct varieties and because offspring could be used quickly and easily. My findings were not viewed as being generally applicable, but I applied them on certain species and types of traits. And this is how I show today that this is one of the fundamental biology.
Through the selective crossbreeding of common pea plants over many generations, I discovered that certain traits show up in offspring without any blending of parent characteristics. For instance, the pea flowers are either purple or white. Intermediate colors do not appear in the offspring of cross-pollinated pea plants. I observed 7 traits that are easily recognized and apparently only occur in one of 2 forms. The first one is the flowered color is purple or white. The second one is that flower position is axial or terminal. The third is the stem length is long or short. The fourth is the seed shape is round or wickled. The fifth is seed color is yellow or green. The sixth is pod shape is inflated or constricted. The seventh is pod color is yellow or green. I also observed that some of the traits from the pea plant were dominant while the others were recessive, so some traits were more often to happen than others.
Now I'm going to explain my 3 laws. The first one is the law of dominance. A dominant trait is a trait whose appearance will always be seen in offspring. In other words, dominance describes the relationship between 2 alleles. If an individual inherits 2 different alleles from each of its 2 parents and the phenotype of only one allele is visible in the offsprings, then that allele is said to be dominant. So, my law of dominance states that if one parent has 2 copies of allele A, the dominant allele, and the second parent has 2 copies of allele A, the recessive allele, then the offsprings will inherit an AA genotype and display the dominant phenotype. My second law is the law of segregation. A parent may have 2 distinct alleles for a certain gene, each on 1 copy of a given chromosome. So this law states that these 2 alleles will be separated from each other during meiosis. Specifically, in the second of the 2 cell divisions of meiosis, the 2 copies of each chromosome will be separated from each other, causing the 2 distinct alleles located on those chromosomes to segregate from one another. My third law is the law of independent assortment. It states that the way an allele pair gets segregated into 2 daughter cells during the second division of meiosis has no effect on how any other allele pair gets segregated. In other words, the trait inherited through another gene will be inherited independently of the traits inherited through another gene because the genes reside on different chromosomes that are independently assorted into daughter cells during meiosis.
Around 1854, I began to research the transmission of hereditary traits in plant hybrids. The results of such research were often secured by the relatively short period of time during which the experiments were conducted. I chose to use peas for my experiments due to their many distinct varieties and because offsprings could be quickly and easily produced. I cross-fertilized pea plants that had really opposite characteristics, and after analyzing my results, I got my 2 important conclusions. The law of segregation, which established that there are dominant and recessive traits passed on randomly from parents to offspring, and the law of independent assortment, which established that the traits were passed on independently on other traits from parent to offspring. I also proposed that these hereditary follow the basic statistical laws.
Now I'm going to introduce you to my best friend, the Punnett square. This little thing helped us to illustrate the crosses I did, and I will assist you in figuring out a multitude of genetic problems. We will start by using the Punnett square to illustrate the law of dominance. Remember that I discovered this law by crossing a pure tall pea plant and a pure short pea plant. In symbols, the cross looked like this. The p-square for such a cross looked like this. Inside the 4 boxes are the possible genotypes with respect to the plant height of the offspring from these parent pea plants. In this case, the only possible genotype is the heterozygous T. In hybrids, the dominant trait, whatever the capital letter stands for, is the one that appears in the phenotype, so all the offsprings form this cross will have tall stems. To fill in the boxes of the Punnett square, say to yourself, letter from the left and letter from the top. The lowercase t from the left is partnered with the capital letter T from the top to complete each of the 4 squares. A summary of this cross will be. Now I will explain the law of segregation. So I take 2 of the F1 generation, which are tall, and I crosses them. I figure that I will gonna get all tall again, since tall is dominant, but no. I get some short plants from this cross, so the F2 generation is about 75% tall and 25% short. I think it's easier to picture this law of segregation by using a p-square. Our cross is 2 hybrid parents. The Punnett square will look like this. Now when completing a Punnett square, we model this law every time. When you split the genotype letters and put one above each column, one in front of each row, you have segregated the alleles for a specific trait. You can see from the p-square that anytime you cross 2 hybrids, 3 of the 4 boxes will produce an organism with the dominant trait, and 1 of the 4 boxes end up zygous recessive, producing an organism with the recessive phenotype. Our summary is: now the law of independent assortment. During the experiment, I noticed that the different traits seem to be inherited independently. For this, there is a Punnett square that illustrates this law. It involves what is known as a dihybrid cross, meaning that the parents are hybrid for 2 different traits. The genotypes of our parent pea plants will be, where capital R is the dominant allele for round seeds, lowercase r is the recessive allele for wrinkled seeds, the capital G is the dominant allele for green pods, and the lowercase g is the recessive allele for yellow pods. Notice that we are dealing with 2 different traits, 1 the seed texture and 2 the pod color. Also notice that each parent is hybrid for each trait, so 1 is dominant and 1 is recessive. We need to split the genotype letters and come up with the possible gametes for each parent. Keep in mind that the gamete should get half as many total letters as the parent and only 1 of each letter. So each gamete should have 1 R and 1 G for a total of 2 letters. So there are 4 possible letter combinations. This is what it looks like the Punnett square. The results from the dihybrid cross are always the same. 9 over 16 boxes show dominant phenotype for both traits. round and green. 3/16 show dominant phenotype for first trait and recessive for second, round and yellow. 3/16 show recessive phenotype for first trait and dominant for the second, wrinkle and green, and 1/16 show recessive form of both traits, wrinkle and yellow. So to conclude, the different traits do not influence in the inheritance of each other, they are inherited independently.